Hello and welcome back to Satisfactory. My name is Wakata, and today we're going to clean up this yard. I know, it's like a running joke, right? I say that every time. But this time, I mean it. We're definitely, most likely, very probably going to take at least one machine out of this yard in this episode. Last episode we set out to do rotors and we just missed the mark, and I apologize for that. But when we got into the math, we realized that there was a lot more to do before we could start a proper building. And even though I knew that going into the episode, I thought that we would have enough time, and we just didn't. After we got the copper upgraded and I started in on the screw building, things just took too long, talking and doing things, and that's okay. We don't really want to rush it. We don't want the entire series to be a montage, and sometimes we don't have enough time to do what we set out to do, and that's okay. The good news is that we got all of that done, and more importantly, we got all of our foundational work done in the sphere of all the constructors. We still need to upgrade the plate building, but we'll get around to that when we really have to. So this episode, we are going to start off going straight into assemblies. Now, I originally had a different plan for the start of this episode. I wanted to show you guys live my thought process of how we determine where we're going to place a building, how we're going to work it into the environment, what the size of the building is going to have to be, what the height is going to be so that it doesn't have, ground sticking up at some point. And I, in fact, had already kind of prepared to do that last episode, and we didn't have time. And so I figured I would just pick up with that plan this episode, but then I started looking into what we really needed to do, and well, the math got us again. And I ended up having to plan out not one building, but several buildings, and I'll go over that shortly after the intro. But because of it, it would have taken more than an entire episode of walking around showing you just the mapping out of the buildings. I spent over an hour figuring out where these buildings are going to be. So instead of doing it live, I left the foundations in place, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to go over there, and I'm going to show you the mental process and how I got to where we got to, and why we're going to have to do what we're going to have to do. So this intro's already run long. Let's get off of the balcony and let's get to work. All right, so here we are behind the copper manufacturing building. And originally I kind of wanted to do the rotors somewhere around here, but once I realized our screw needs, I kind of realized that this might not be the best area for it, but it's still a good area for assembly. So the logic kind of begins with determining where we can make a building. And all you do is just draw a line across and just draw it across this big old area. It's a lot of open space, but it's not all buildable at the same height unless we determine ahead of time where is the highest point, where are our obstacles, and kind of map out the entire area. And that's what we did. We built an entire line of foundations all the way across, and when we lined it up with the top floor of the copper building, it actually was a little bit too low. We ran into things like this. If it was a little lower, we would lose an entire line. And it was kind of close on some of the terrain, some of the rocks poking up. And so with a little bit of playing around with heights, I found that this is a very good height for basically the entire area. And then the only real obstacles we have are the big trees that we don't want to cut down. And we're going to try not to cut down trees wherever possible. And so, we just go through and figure out kind of where are the largest blocks of area we can do that aren't going to run into, any tree really, or obstacles, and can kind of give us at least a minimum amount of space for dropping down assemblers. And it's pretty easy, you know, once you just start drawing it all out and start deleting things that run into nice looking trees, the area starts to map itself out. You see how it gets kind of close to that tree there. And, you know, we go over here, we start running into these spines. So that defines this area, tree on the far end. And then we just start dropping down assemblers or constructors or whatever the building is meant to be. And determine how wide it's going to be, how long it can be, how many machines do we want as a minimum. Well, you know, when it comes to assemblers, 4 for me is kind of a minimum. We know that when we get into buildings or when we get into machines, even numbers tend to work out a little bit better in our favor. 4 seems to be a pretty good number to start with when it comes to assemblers. So, you know, I dropped down 4 assemblers. This isn't necessarily exactly where they're going to be, but we can see that we have enough space on either side for belting and just kind of a little room to breathe and on either end. So this turned out to be a pretty good building location. The other one we were able to do a lot wider, and so, you know, I determined, well, it looks like we could do 2 back to back. And that kind of helped us define this total area. Now, I don't know that I'm going to do back-to-back manufacturing here, but we can. And that helps us determine the dimensions of the buildings. After we've laid out the dimensions of where different buildings can be, we need to determine what's going to be in each building. And that's kind of driven by what supplies we have where. Now, I want the manufacturing for our rotors to be near this building because of all the screws that are going to come out of here. I don't want to take these belts very far. So this is kind of a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned on making this platform into our rotor construction. We know that rotors are going to take a lot of screws. I mean, look at this, 195 per belt. We also know that we're going to want to belt the remaining screws back over to here. So this is definitely where our rotor production is going to be. That being said, we have a lot of assembly items that we need to make, not necessarily today, but then we go through the entire chain and it helps us figure out where everything's going to be. Of course, our end goal is motors, and motors require stators, which are going to come from the belt highway, and rotors, which right now aren't being made anywhere. But if we're making them right there, and we know the belt highway is over there, this seems to be a pretty good spot between the 2 of them that we can bring them together. That also means that we're going to be bringing the stuff from the highway over to this location, so we can look at this location for what else is going to be using things from the belt highway. Well, it may not be obvious, but we're going to need reinforced plate, and reinforced plate is going to require steel. Now, the plan has always been that we're going to use the bolted iron plate because it has crazy output of 15 per minute. And it may not look like it requires steel, but it does for the way we're going to build it. So this is going to be a good area for us to do that. And what are we going to need plate for? Well, we're going to need reinforced plate for modular frames. Modular frames are going to use rods. So we can do all this here and rod buildings right there. We could stack it on top of this building. We could maybe put another building in the middle somewhere. That allows us to build towards the center. And that makes things also work out very well for us. And I know you're thinking, well, we still have that building over there near the copper, and we're going to use copper for the rotors, and that's fine. We have another assembly item that uses copper that we are not currently doing, which is all the way down here, the AI limiter. Now right now we don't have the copper sheeting to run the AI limiters and the rotors, but that's fine. We're not going to do those right now, but that building over there could easily be the AI limiter building. We'd run copper sheeting through it, and then out of it, and then connect it to this building over here. So that looks like a plan. And I think that's exactly what we're going to do with this. So we're going to get started with bringing the belt highway over here. We're going to need to get the steel products over here, and then we can start routing things appropriately. Once we know where all the belts are going to be, we'll start building the buildings. So actually, let's get over to the belt highway and start extending it. All right, so here we are back at the belt highway, and I've gone ahead and extended this out far enough for our first platform that we're going to target. And fortunately, thanks to a little bit of foresight, the products that we need are actually already on the outside for our steel beams here and our stators. But this design is very versatile and very intentional, and we could get products from the inside out here just fine, which is why we have this middle part always open. It allows for transfers from inner to outer. But let's get going and start building this out. Now this is going to be just a helper platform, kind of give us a visual. We don't care about this being lined up over here, we just care about being lined up over there. And we need to split off of both of these lines. Now arguably we don't really have to split off of the stators because probably we won't use stators over there for anything, but our storage is there for now, so we're going to make this a split as opposed to just a turn. Later on we can change that. And we're going to do the stators first. We're going to have them go down this side. So what we want to do is we want to split. So we're going to line up. And I don't really care about the location or the orientation of those because the top item is going to be a splitter. We're actually going to make it a smart splitter. And now the orientation matters, the directionality does. And we don't have an AI limiter. Give me a second. All right, now we do have AI limiters. I actually have a secret assembler that has been making AI limiters for a little bit of time now. So let's turn that to Smart Splitter. And it's lined up nicely. And that's all we're going to need for that line. I don't mind having splitters floating on belts. That works just fine for me. And we're going to grab that. We're going to run it to its new location. There we go. That's all we need for that particular item. We're no longer going to use this as our target pole, but we do need to have supports in the middle. So what we first need is to replace that middle support. We're going to do that right here. Make sure that's lined up. The highest item is going to be a conveyor pole, so we're building those first. We're going to delete that. Get ourselves another smart splitter. And stack. And stack. And remove that. As you can see, the conveyor pole is still targetable. Let's just grab the middle here if we can. Please. Good grief. And we can run it straight across the top. So that is still there, and it's there intentionally. But we don't need one up here because we're just going to connect this straight to the next point, which is up there. And we can now take out our belt here because we're going to reconnect those. Belt there. Let's grab it there. Connect it to the splitter. Splitter can carry on to storage. Let's make sure we're actually targeting we're targeting the pole because the conveyor lift is attached to the pole. We didn't want to skip the pole. All right. And that's all we needed for this. And now we can take care of that. Get rid of that. And we're going to shift our priorities. We want to send overflow towards storage. So left is going to be the main. Center will be overflow. That's going to be true for the one above us as well. Let's grab that, center, overflow, and that's all it takes. Now we're just going to build this out the rest of the way. All we need to do is go 6 at a time, and we can see the counter there, times 6. This can be a kind of a pain. It doesn't want to cooperate, which is why I typically build one early, step out, and do that. All right, so we're going to stop the highway right here until we have the buildings. That way it's going to be easier for us to determine where we actually need to edge up the conveyors so that we can start either bringing them down on lifts or taking them straight into walls. And we're going to get to building some assembler buildings. Now, I think what I want to start with is the reinforced plate and explaining why we needed to bring steel over here for reinforced plate. So let's get a easy way up and down. Oh, and we just fall off. So for the strategy of doing the reinforced plate, the bolted reinforced plate, we need to take something into consideration, which is that bolted reinforced plate takes 250 screws per minute. Now, if you remember from last episode, we set these up over here to do 240 per minute with 5 machines. That's going to cover our 195 on those. Now that's too shy of doing this. So we're not going to do the same for this. Plus, I don't really want to do another several floors just for a few manufacturers. No, we have an alternate option. Alternate being the key word. We drop down our constructor here. We get another very nice recipe called steel screws. And looky here, for a mere 5 per minute, we get 260 screws per minute out of one single machine. That's nice. So 260 per minute of one of these dedicated straight to one of these for the 250 per minute. And that's all we need. We just chain it right in. Very nice, very clean, very easy. So that's going to be the plan here, is that I'm going to determine where exactly I want to do the assemblers. And probably we'll put a floor above it where we will have the constructors bringing the steel in and then feeding the screws straight down in through lifts, and that's all we need. Along with, of course, you know, the plate that will be brought in from somewhere over there. You know, we'll run it up around, we'll find a way. All right, so let me get to some final mapping out and planning of exactly where these machines are going to be, and we'll get to constructing that building. All right, I think I've got the math and the plan and some things in mind. I think we can actually get started on this. We're going to go over a little bit of math real quick, very, very quick. So we are going to do our reinforced iron plate and our modular frames, and that's going to be kind of the rest of the goal for this episode. Looking at the modular frames, they only produce 2 per minute, which is not a very good output rate. Fortunately, it's not very demanding on resources, so we can run multiple machines. And if we use this large building, then we can fit multiple machines. So I was thinking with our reinforced plate output, which is 15 per minute on one machine, thanks to our awesome recipe, we could get away with, say, 3 machines for a reinforced plate and use the rest of this floor for modular frames. And if we slide over a little bit to about here, we can pretty comfortably fit 6 of these side by side, which means 12 machines for a floor. If we take away 3 of them for the reinforced plate, then that's 9 machines for the modular frames. And we definitely have enough iron rod coming in for that. And we will be able to produce enough reinforced plate thanks to this recipe with its 15 output. Now, in the short term, we do have one little hiccup that we don't have to address now, which is that this machine requires 90 per minute iron plate, which we are not producing even enough to run 2 of these machines. Not at full speed. We're producing, I think, 160 per minute right now. But you know what? That's fine. That's fine. We know that we're going to upgrade the iron plate building in the near future over there. And we also know that it's only using half of its input. So it'll be easy to surpass the total number of plate necessary. We'll be needing, what, 270 per minute? And we can ramp up without having to change our inputs. 320? Yeah, 320. 320 and only need 270. So we'll deal with that in the future. Right now we're producing enough plate to run a machine at full and one at nearly at full, which will more than give us enough to supply all these machines. So that's what we're going to do. We're also going to make a false floor here. So this first floor is going to be for our belting. And we're going to do, let's see here. We're going to do a little kind of a side thing for the constructors that are necessary for these. Because I want something a little more interesting in shapes. Let's get our way up there. Show you what I had in mind. We need inverted ramps for concrete. These guys right here. So I think we're going to do something like this. No, I want you to go up. Oh, fine. You know what? We'll just do that. Oh, all right. Excellent, this is really what I wanted to be anyway. So we'll do something like this. And we'll make this kind of like a balcony. And the steel beam will come right into the balcony. And this is where we'll build our constructors. And this will probably be open to the air. And they'll just kind of come down the slope right here and into the 3 constructors that we have. So everything's going to work out really nicely, and it'll give us a unique shape to this building. But I think it's going to be it. We're going to put probably a generic roof on it because this building is going to have a lot of potential in the future, and I don't think that we're going to be anywhere near done with the building for the long term. But for today, we just need 1 floor. So let's kick into a time lapse and see what we can come up with. All right, we are done with that. Well, that really came together. I'm standing up here because I'm trying to get a screenshot for our thumbnail. So what we do, we go into photo mode, hide the interface, and wait for the smoke to pass. I think that's going to be good right there. All right. Yeah, this is what I do. That's how I make my thumbnails. So we are running out of time. We don't have time for a full walkthrough of this building, but honestly, you saw me build it. We talked about the math before we started. It came out as expected. You know, we have 9 machines for the modular frames and 3 for the reinforced plate. This is the belting floor, which honestly turned out to be a little more of a challenge than I expected, and that's largely because these are so close to each other that I needed to wrap what will be the plates, or no, these are going to be the rods, around on either side of it. And we also have our outputs coming down, like the modular frames. The modular frames will come down here, and they'll merge and go down through the floor. So I'm going to run everything here. If we can get it to connect, thank you. It comes to here, and that will start it all up. And of course, we don't have enough plate at the moment, but that's fine. And they will all end up downstairs in a little storage room. Now, for the temporary setup here is that we had to run our input lines across here. What will likely happen is after we turn this into a building, we will run these around the outside of the wall using wall conveyors, like that one right there. But for now, we're just going to run it across the platform until we need the space for something else. Okay, well, that's going to be it for that. I know we have a couple of minutes left. That's going to be both for the outro and for a couple of things I wanted to do real quick. So first off, we are sort of ready to do another step of the space elevator. Let's jump up there and show you. We can do these. We've already made these before. So 2,500, it's a fair amount, but it's something we can handle. I moved the machines up here. And if we look at the math, 2,500 of these is going to be 1,250 modular frames. We'll have to go get those. Of course, we're just now starting to manufacture them, but we do have a backlog of them. And it's 6 beams per framework is 15,000 steel beams. Well, I saw that ahead of time, so I started collecting, and I already have those together. We have 9,600 here, and the 5,400 up there, and those will run out. Let's go get the modular frames. And here is our modular frame storage amongst all of our yard waste. And we said we need 1,250, I believe, and there's 12,000 already in there, or 1,200. So I'm going to go ahead and break that belt. I'm going to take all, and we just need 50 more. Even up that stack, and we'll take them up to the load. And finally, all we need to do is just connect all of it together. Actually, want this to feed, well, I do it from the other side. And that's going to take care of that. It's going to take a long time for them to all process, but you know, we got a ton of other things to do anyway. And that will be one of our products done. Okay, so for the last little bit we are going to clean up the yard of all the stuff that we no longer need. And that's probably going to be a montage because, oh boy, there's a lot to get out and not very much time to do it. So let's go. But that's going to wrap it for today. Look how clean our yard is getting. Yeah, we're going to have to do something about the concrete because that's really what's taking up most of the yard at this point. But again, most of it's just for sinking. I mean, obviously I go through a ton of concrete, so we need an official facility, but it's not part of a manufacturing loop at the moment. But we can see right there through the little crack between the buildings, we can see the little bit top of our new building. And yeah, I mean, it's great. It's great. We finally got some manufacturers off the yard and into an official building, and we now have the foundation to do the other manufacturing items. So it's going to go a little bit more quickly at that point until we are ready to go into the next milestone where we'll start unlocking things with oil. But we are probably well over time at this point, so thank you so much for coming out. If you liked it, be sure you leave a like. You haven't subscribed yet, consider subscribing. Twitter, the spiel. uh, Very happy to have you guys come out, and I really appreciate the comments that I've been getting lately. So thanks very much. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next episode.